our Rosh Chodesh program, where every month we learn a little bit of Torah, and it enhances our new month celebration. So we're in the month of Sivan now, and I think Mr. Yoni Monat picked a very interesting topic because it has formal and informal. So I'm looking forward to hearing how one goes with the other.
Thank you. Imam, for the introduction. Hope everyone is doing well post Shavuos. The title of this shir is Rav Yosef and the Average Joe, the Impact of Torah. And it's going to be based mostly on the Gemara in Pesachim Daf Samach Ches on Beis 68b. And I spent a lot of time looking into this Gemara and speaking with different people over my stint at Boston Cola for Shavuos. So hopefully this shir will be some of the fruits and pears of that, that investigation. So if anyone wants to follow along, we're going to be starting from the Gemara in Pesachim, Daf Samach Ches on Beis. So in this Gemara, the Gemara is discussing about the different Yom Tovim, what role should eating and drinking have in the Yom Tovim. And the Gemara says, Hakol Modim, all agree, Batzares on Shavuos Tabina Nami Lachem, that there needs to be some element of food and drink. May, according to the various logic of the Gemara, may or may not apply to the other festivals, but at least on Shavuos, all agree that food and drink is a required part of the celebration. And Rashi says, Tabina Nami Lachem, Sheyismach. Well, first off, the Gemara says, my timer, what's the reason for the special ruling on Shavuos that we need food and drink? It's because Yom Shenisna Bo Torah. Who? Because Shavuos is the day that we receive the Torah. That's why we need food and drink. And Rashi says, Sheyismach mo b'machlof mishta, that we should have simcha, we should rejoice with the food and drink. Laharos, to externally display, Shenoach u'mekubal, that it's like pleasant and well accepted. Yom Zeh Yisrael, this day for the Jewish people, Shenatna Torah bo, Shenitna Torah bo, the Torah was given on it. So Rashi says the purpose of having food and drink on Shavuos is in order to externally display that it's pleasing to accept the Torah on Shavuos. So at this point in the Gemara is not saying a person necessarily needs to have the most fancy or delicate meal or decadent meal, but a person should provide nice food for him or herself on Shavuos as a way to demonstrate that it is pleasant and accepted that we receive the Torah. One of the things like Boston Kollel, Rabbi Shaul Simon, he takes Rashi as saying that to show that we're excited about receiving the Torah. That's what he understood Rashi. But at least in the straight words of Rashi, it's about that it's well accepted for us to receive the Torah. Then later on, the Gemara tells the story of Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef b'yomat atzrasa, Rav Yosef on Shavuos, Amr, he said, Avdi le iglat tilsa. He said, prepare for me an iglat tilsa. So what's an iglat tilsa? Says Rashi, Shlishi lebetzin umufkahu. It is the third born calf of its mother, the third born, which in the times of the Gemara was believed to be the most tasty. So the first part of the Gemara, we learned that we're holding by Pesachim Samach Ches and Beis, that there's a general precept for all of Klal Yisrael to provide food on Shavuos, food and drink that they generally enjoy, to display that we're pleased to receive the Torah. And then Shavuos specifically is a story with Rav Yosef, B'yomat atzrasa amar avdili iglat tilsa. So he said, bring me an iglat tilsa. Rashi says, shlishi lebetzin umufkahu, which is the third born calf, and that was the tastiest. So Rav Yosef, we see, is going to a much further extent than the basic halacha. The basic halacha, as stated earlier in the Gemara, is to provide food that one generally enjoys on Shavuos, food and drink. But Rav Yosef is going all out. He's specifically requesting the third born calf, which is the the finest piece of meat available on the market. And Rav Yosef explains his choice of meal on Shavuos. He says, Ilo hayoma, if not for this day of Shavuos and the concept of Kabbalah HaTorah and receiving the Torah, the Kagarin that brought this about, Kama Yosef Ikabashuka. There are many people named Yosef or Joe in the marketplace. End of statement. So Rashi says, Avdili, Hayamitzav la'anshi beso l'hachan lo suda. If Yosef requested of the members of his family to prepare him a meal, Ilav hayoma shalamati Torah v'nisramanti. Rav Yosef says personally that I learned Torah and I was nisramanti from the lashon of ram, to be elevated. I was elevated through my learning of Torah. Harei anashim harbe b'shuk. Behold, there are many people in the marketplace. Shashman Yosef, that their name is Yosef. Uma beini lebeinam. And what is the difference between me and them? So Rav Yosef is saying, the fact of the matter is there are many people in the marketplace named Joe or Yosef, but the fact that I learned Torah and I was elevated, so that is a clear differentiator between me and the other people named Yosef in the marketplace. So we see that because of Rav Yosef's feeling of Lamati Torah v'Nisramanti, because he learned Torah and he felt elevated, that's why he went all out on Shavuos to demonstrate how pleased he was to receive the Torah, not just to have nice food in general on Shavuos, but to have absolutely the best he could find, the third-born calf. Does anyone have any comments about this Gemara before we start to analyze?
Of course, there could have been other Yosefs or Joes learning Torah.
Right, that's true as well. Rav Yosef was the Rosh Yeshiva. He was one of the greatest Talmidei Chacham of the generation. So the amount that he learned was far greater than most anyone else.
Yeah. You know when he lived, Yoni, during the time of the Gemara?
Yeah, he was one of the Rebbeim of the Gemara.
He's still here.
I'd like to welcome Mrs. Markson joining us from Boston for the second time.
Yoni,
Yes, Mrs. Kiel.
I was surprised that this is about the best meat because it's usually people have dairy on Shavuos.
Okay, so there are different minhagim. There's some Mishnah Berurah says to have both dairy and meat, but it seems like the minhag most amongst the people who I spend time around on Shavuos is that there is some consumption of dairy, but also some consumption of meat on Shavuos.
Okay. Yoni, I also have a question. Was it a year ago that you gave a share for Shavuos on having something to do with cheesecake?
I spoke around Thanksgiving time about the difference between pumpkin pie and cheesecake in halacha. So I'd like to discuss the question about why we have good food on Shavuos. Meaning, if Shavuos is the day that we receive the Torah, then what role does physically having pleasant or tasty food have to do with it? And why did Rav Yosef choose to demonstrate his gratitude for receiving the Torah by having tasty meat? So one answer is what Rashi said. Rashi said, Lachem, in order to display to other people, maybe in one's family, that Shavuos is a pleasant day to oneself. So the way to display that a person appreciates the day of Shavuos is by putting out a nice meal. The Ksava Kabbalah says that the purpose of having nice meals on Shabbos and Yom Tov is to demonstrate that it's an important day. So, for example, many people have a nice meal on a birthday because a birthday is an important day. So in the Torah, Shabbos or Yom Tov or Shavuos are important days, and therefore we put out a nice meal to demarcate the significance of this day. And based on rediscovering the lost self, so he would say that the reason why Rav Yosef put out, or why anyone puts out a nice meal on Shavuos, is to put us in a positive mood to receive the Torah. Because when our body is in a positive mood and mindset, then we're more likely to receive the Torah properly. So, next question I'd like to address is, who exactly are the Yosefs in the marketplace? When Rav Yosef said, Kama Yosef Ikabashuka, what type of person is he addressing when he is talking about Yosef? So, there are two main approaches to this question. The first one I'll discuss is what I was talking about with Rabbi Shlomi Lindenbaum, Boston Kollel, is he said that the Yosefs in the marketplace is anyone who does not have Torah. Whether it's Jew, non-Jew, if there's a person who has not made the Torah part of their life, that's who Rav Yosef was differentiating himself between, that I learned Torah, made it a part of me, and I was elevated, whereas various people in the populace, like what Meir Chavusa or Hershel Yaffe called the average Joe, did not, so therefore I was elevated to a higher state. Now, this reminded me of art I saw recently, I worked on a little bit, is by Isha Chayil, what we say, Ravos Banus Asuchayil V'Yatalis Al Kulana. So, what does it exactly mean that the Isha Chayil has been elevated on all of that? So, Rabbi Shel Simon, Boston Kollel, said what it really means is that the Isha Chayil has elevated herself amongst the general populace of women. Meaning, not to say that she's any greater in particular than any other Jewish woman, but that overall, compared to the non-Jewish populace, she is on a much higher level. And the Sefer Pirchei Shoshanim says it's because of what it says in the next pasuk, Isha Yiras Hashem Hisashalo, that a woman who fears Hashem is to be praised. That thus, through a woman's Yir Shemayim, through her fear of Hashem, that's how she became elevated amongst the populace of the non-Jewish women. And so, that's for one. Now, who are we not talking about? We're not talking about someone like my great-great-grandfather, Avram Yitzchak Scheinzeit, whose yahrzeit is this month. And the Shir is Ilinish Masim, Avram Yitzchak Ben David, as well as Rivka Paddle Bas Yitzchak. So, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak was as he's spoken about many times before in the Sip of Torah, he was a butcher, and he raised 7 kids, mostly by himself, because his wife was Niftaris at age 45. And he was also busy with the Chevra Kadisha that he was involved with, helping the Jewish Burial Society. And amidst doing all of this, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak found the time and headspace to learn Gemara. Not only did he learn, but he finished Shas a total of 6 times, which is an achievement which many learners don't even finish Shas once in their lifetime. He finished 6 times. So, such a person we're not talking about when we talk about Kama Yosef Ikabashuka. Because even though my great-great-grandfather was in the marketplace, but his head was so much in learning. There's a Taisus in Brachas, Daf Yud Aleph, which Eli Malach told me over from Rabbi Kanstein, that basically Taisus wondering how is it possible to say Berachas Torah, the blessing over the Torah, the whole day, and cover the whole day if we stop our learning at some point. And Taisus says, basically, the Rabbi Kanstein explains that if a person makes Berachas Torah in the morning, makes the bracha in the morning, then when he works Torah dik, meaning he works in the way of the Torah, he works honestly, he speaks gently with people, he tries to do the best work he can for his customers, and then he comes back and he learns whenever he has an opportunity to open a sefer. So if he does these 2 things, he's working in the way of the Torah, and he learns whenever possible, that's considered like he never made a hefsek, he never stopped his limud haTorah. So therefore, as such a person is also elevates himself, even though it may not be as much as the person who's learning the whole day on a hefsek who's learning Yom V'Layla Mamish, day and night. But for a person like my great-grandfather, he's able to be disromim and elevated by the Torah to a great degree. So when Rav Yosef says Kama Yosef Ikav Shukag, he's not talking about the type of worker who's also a masmid. Rabbi Shlomo Lindenbaum says the masmid definition is someone who makes the most of his time for learning, no matter how much or how little he has. He's a masmid. On this topic, I'll also mention a story. So when I was learning in Monsey, my Rashiva, Rabbi Avraham Braun, one time it was on Thanksgiving Day, and he saw one of his Talmidim, who now works as a dentist in Monsey, was entering the base medrash. And Rabbi Braun told his Talmud, he said, the fact that you're here today on Thanksgiving, on your day off, that shows Hashem that if you would have had more time available to learn, that you would be learning more. So therefore, all the time that you're not learning and you're working or doing other activities, Hashem considers it as if you're really learning. So that's the first approach, is that Kama Yosef Ikav Shukag is the Yosefs who were Jewish or not Jewish, meaning anyone without Torah, but it could be non-Jews. Now I want to tell a story that Rabbi Cheskel Nolman, Rabbi of Torah Academy in Boston, told me that could be frame Rav Yosef's statement in a different light. Rabbi Nolman suggested this is the type of person Rav Yosef was referring to. So, the Netziv, his name was Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, was a Rosh Yeshiva of the Luzhin in the 19th century. And however, he was not always such a big masmid, because when he was young, when he was in grade school, he was in some sort of Talmud Torah, and young Naftali Tzvi Yehuda was apparently not such a big masmid. He wasn't such an ardent learner, because at one point he was sitting in his bedroom and he overheard his parents talking about what to do with him, because he wasn't really so motivated in his studies, and they talked about taking him out of Talmud Torah and making him a cobbler. Cobbler is someone who works with shoes. So at that point, young Naftali Tzvi Yehuda, something came up inside of him, and he realized that something very precious and very important was about to be taken from him if he was taken out of Talmud Torah. And because at that point they didn't have so much money to keep people in learning if they weren't really being a stark masmid. So young Naftali Tzvi Yehuda, he started learning with a bren, with a milas, putting his kochos and energy into his learning, so much so that he ended up becoming the Rosh Yeshiva of the Luzhin. So when the Netziv was 70 years old, he put out one of his Sfarim. He put out many Sfarim, and at that time he decided to make a Suda to celebrate putting out the Sefer. So at the Suda, the Netziv got up and explained the purpose for the Suda. He said the reason is because when I go to Shemayim, I'm going to be asked. Some books are going to be put out in front of me. One of them is the Hamek Davar, the Meshav Davar, the Merumei Sadeh, and they're going to ask me, so these are your books. And he told the story of how he was young and how he overheard the conversation from his mother. And then Netziv would have answered, I'm just a cobbler. What are you talking about? I'm the author of Hamek Davar, Meshav Davar, and Merumei Sadeh. I'm just a cobbler. What do you expect from me? And Shemai would have said, no, these were your Sfarim. These were the Sfarim you were supposed to put out. So the Netziv was celebrating now that I heeded the call and I learned properly and I even put out these Sfarim. So I could have been a cobbler. I would have been Shomer Shabbos. I would have been an Erlich Yid. I would have been an upstanding Jew. But I would have missed out on my potential. My potential as a Talmud Chacham to put out these Sfarim, to be the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin. So today I'm making the Suda as a celebration for what I become, the fact that I achieved my potential. So we see from here that, from what Rabbi Noman is trying to give over, is that when Rav Yosef said Kama Yosef Ika B'Shukah, he could have been talking about even other people named Yosef who were Jewish and who were Shomer Shabbos and who were in Erlich Yid, who generally did the mitzvahs for the most part. But since he didn't achieve and capitalize on his potential, that's what Rav Yosef was differentiating himself between himself and the other people named Yosef who may not have necessarily achieved their potential. Those other Yosefs, they were obligated to celebrate Shavuos to show that it's a pleasing day for the day we got the Torah, but ultimately they did not have the Shalamat the Torah v'Nishamamti. They didn't learn Torah and become elevated. They didn't fully achieve their potential. Rav Yosef, it could be, was celebrating that he achieved his potential and was not like Kam Yosef B'Shukah, who had really left something on the table. For example, one of Rav Yosef's jobs in the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Yud Tes, on Erev Shabbos, Rav Yosef used to chop wood. So, Kanir, it appears Rav Yosef could have been a professional wood chopper. But if that was his potential, that would have been a good thing. But Rav Yosef felt his potential was to be one of the Gedolei Yisrael, one of the great Talmidei Chacham of the generation, and he applied himself and he learned, and therefore Rav Yosef on Shavuos was celebrating what he had become. I'd like to say a mashal from the Chavetz Chaim. This mashal has to do with probably what we spoke about a little bit more earlier, which is about Rav Yosef comparing himself versus the non-Jewish people named Joe, but a worthwhile mashal. So the mashal is that there was a boy who had some friends and they were riding the train. And the other boys came from a poor family, so he didn't actually have a ticket to ride the train. However, this boy was a child of a wealthy family, so his father had purchased not only a ticket, but he purchased him a first-class ticket. And the father said, when the conductor comes, pull out this stub and you'll show the conductor you have a right to be on the train. So the other boys, since they didn't have a ticket, whenever the conductor comes, they would duck and hide underneath the seats. And the other boy from a wealthy family, he didn't have so much seichel, he didn't have so much intellect. So what he did is he would also duck underneath the seats with them, because that was just what everyone was doing. That was kind of the common thing. So came time, the conductor came, he caught the rich boy hiding underneath the seat, and he said, "Ticket!" And the rich boy pulled out his ticket, and the conductor was astonished. He said, "Young man, you have a right to be riding comfortably in first class. What are you doing ducking underneath the seats with the other boys who don't have a ticket?" So the Chavetz Chaim said as a nimshal that we are like the wealthy boy who has a first-class ticket through life. The fact that we have the Torah, which shows us how to act and how to live. So other people who don't have Torah are like the people who are ducking underneath the seats. So if we don't appreciate the Torah, we'll end up ducking underneath the seats, doing things unscrupulously in business, speaking lashon hara, not respecting proper boundaries. But if we appreciate the Torah, that what we have is the Torah, like Rabbi Naftali Bir Bas Moshe Kolal says that Torah is the guidebook to life. If we appreciate the Torah as a guidebook to life, then we'll be riding comfortably in first class throughout life. The next question I'd like to talk about is, how did Rav Yosef avoid looking down at the average Joe? Meaning, Rav Yosef recognized that he was in this room and he was taken to a new level, but how did he avoid looking with a negative lens at the Kama Yosef B'Shukah, the other Jews in the marketplace. So I was thinking about this with my Chavrusa, Rabbi Noach Chastis on Yisrael of Sharon, and he said that really it takes a great onav, a very humble person, to both appreciate one's own milas and strengths as a Ben Torah or Bas Yisrael, and at the same time to not look down at the other people. So the Chavos Levavos at the beginning of Shar Hachna teaches that an onav, a humble person, recognizes his own greatness. That's the very foremost statement of humility, that one recognizes his own greatness. The Mesil Sharm talks about why a humble person and a Talmud Chacham does not look down on other people. One answer is because, for example, Rav Yosef could have thought that it's true, Baruch Hashem, I became a big Talmud Chacham under Rosh Yeshiva, but it could be that the Kama Yosef B'Shukah, the other Jews, if they were in my situation, with my upbringing and my talents and capabilities, it could be they would have achieved the same heights in Torah, if not greater. So therefore, there's no room for me, Rav Yosef, to be haughty with regard to these other people. And another reason for Mitzvah Sharm is that if Rav Yosef's job was to learn Torah, so it could be someone else's job is to be a cobbler, or to raise the Igla Tilsa, to be a farmer, or to transport the meat. So every person has his role, and therefore there's no room for any one person to be niska and have haughtiness over someone else, because everyone is just fulfilling his role in Hashem's orchestra, in Hashem's army. And we can see from Rashi says, Lamad Torah b'nisramamti. Rav Yosef was nisromim, he was elevated. It doesn't say he put down the other people, just that Rav Yosef himself was elevated to a higher level. And Rav Victor Miller on Chovos Levavos Sharachna, he says that in Anav, a humble person is always looking to improve his spiritual standing. And Anav is always trying to steig more in Torah and mitzvahs. And once he does so, when he achieves a new plateau in Avodas Hashem, he's grateful to Hashem for this new opportunity to serve Him and to become close with Hashem. And like this is, for example, Rav Yosef, who shechted the Igla Tilsa, he shechted the third-born calf as a way, I believe, as a way to demonstrate how grateful he is to Hashem that Hashem allowed him to become such a Talmud Chacham. Now I'd like to turn my attention to another aspect of Lamati Torah and Shemamti, which is regards to women's role in learning Torah. So the question is it true that women don't need to learn Torah? So this is a statement that women don't need to learn Torah. So what exactly does it mean? So the Beis Halevi, Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, one of the first Rebbeim of Brisk, he makes a chiluk. He makes a distinction between two areas of Torah learning. The first area is learning Torah, and the second area is carrying out the Torah. So the Beis Halevi says that men are obligated to learn Torah and to carry out the Torah. Women are exempt from learning Torah, but they are required to carry out the Torah. So what this means is that, according to the Beis Halevi, that if a woman would have in her mind all of the ideas, all of the knowledge base with which to carry out the Torah and fulfill the mitzvahs properly, she would not need to learn more Torah, whereas a man would. Rav Moshe Feinstein in Igros Moshe, Yoredea, he says that a person who's not learning full time does not need to be an expert in all areas of the halacha, but rather should know enough about the general category of many areas to be able to ask a shaila, ask a question when a question comes up. Now, we may be familiar with the concept of a Yiddish mama or a babi who has a muna pshuta, who has simple faith, but it's not really so necessarily so well learned in Torah. So I can't comment about previous generations, but it could be that such a model may have been somewhat more plausible in previous generations, but nowadays the complexity of halachic shilas have arose, and shilas are much more complex due to the advent of technology and due to women being involved in business more. So the number of shilas that women face are much greater than in the past. So sometimes, so that's one aspect. So Moshe Feinstein is saying that every person should know the general basic areas to ask a shaila, ask a question. And sometimes it comes out that there's even if a person knows the basics, but there's no rabbi to ask about the particulars. For example, if a person's in the park on Shabbos and they're not sure, and there's a tree, and they're thinking about hanging their coat on a tree on Shabbos. So if they've never heard of constant tree interaction on Shabbos, then they may hang the coat on the tree. But if they have heard that we don't lean on a tree with our full weight, we don't shake the tree, we don't put something directly on the tree, but what about hanging something on a hook that's attached to a tree? Or swinging in a hammock that's attached to a tree? So, if a person is not sure of these halachas, there's no rabbi to ask on the spot when a person is in a park and thinking about hanging something on the tree. So, therefore, Chazal expected us to know these halachas clearly, so that when we're in the world, we know that we don't lean on a tree with full weight, we don't hang something on the tree, we don't even hang something on a hook, but if there would be a hammock attached to a hook before Shabbos, then we could go into it as long as we're not shaking the tree. This is just a few examples of some halachas that Chazal expected we should be sharp and shagr b'piv, that we should know them clearly, and we may not necessarily be able to ask a rabbi b'shas ma'isa at the time when we're trying to know what to do. Like another shayla that could come up is in Hilchos Brachos, if a person's has a yogurt with grapes, cantaloupe, and granola. So there's 4 types of food. So the question is which food to make a bracha on? Some or all. So if a person, so one option is to call a rabbi, that a person could do, but not everyone always feels like calling a rabbi when they're having breakfast. So therefore Chazal expect us to have some idea of what to do. So what's the ikr? Like my mother and I have been learning since my grandmother's patira, we've been learning the sefer on ikr v'tafel, primary and subordinate categories and brachos. So what's the primary food? What are you really eating it for? On every spoonful, what is there? Are the side foods being used as a sweetener, or because they're really adding nutritional value? So some of these different elements, Chazal expects us to be able to know in order to be able to approach shilas. Or if a person's on a phone call and the person on the line says, "What do you think about so and so?" So one approach is to call a rabbi and ask, "What am I allowed to say, not allowed to say?" But another approach is to learn the halachas of Chavetz Chaim Shmiras Lashon, like my mom learned in Mrs. Cable's group, so that a person knows what to do in that situation without calling a rabbi. Now, when I was in Baltimore, for Shabbos at the Miller's, Miller, he learned the business halacha sheet with his family. There's a business halacha sheet by Ari Marburger that talks about different cases that could come up in business, and he read it with his family, so that his wife and 2 adult daughters would be familiar with the business principles, so that they could have some basis of knowledge to act properly. Now, in the 39 Malacha Sefer, my father and I are learning, in the introduction, he says that on Shabbos, for many times, even if there may be some act that appears to be a malacha, to be prohibited, but there really is actually a permitted way to go about it. Like, for example, making tea may at first glance seem to be cooking, bishul, but if a person is knows the halachos, they know clearly that if you make tea with a kli shlishi, third cup, then and you take out the tea bag with a spoon, you take out some of the liquid, then making tea on Shabbos can actually be permitted. So learning more sometimes can help a person know what is permitted. And like we say in Shabbos morning davening, 2 halachos per day earns a person entry to Olam Haba. That's all it starts with is 2 halachos per day. Or for Hilchos Shabbos, 2 halachos at the Shabbos Suda. The next subcategories I'd like to talk about is women and learning about hashkafa, about like Torah outlook and thought. So post the Sarah Shneur era, it's accepted that women need to spend some time actively learning hashkafa or musar or chassidus, some sort of thought in which trains a person how to think like a Jew, beyond knowing the halachas, but knowing how to think like a Jew. Because we live in a world which glorifies the externals and sells instant gratification, 2 aspects which are totally opposite of Torah. Now, one of the present Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, Tzvi Kaplan, when he got married, he bought his wife a set of Rabbi Yerucham's. Rabbi Yerucham Levavitz, the Mashgiach of the Mir, is one of the foremost deep thinkers in the Muslim movement of the past 200 years. And Rav Tzvi felt that his wife would benefit from learning the Rabbi Yerucham's. That's why he bought her the set. And there's a story, one time a female educator was speaking with Mara Shiva from Muncie, Rabbi Avram Braun, and she said Avart on the pasuk of V'habor reik ein bo mayim, Parshas V'gisha. The pit was empty, there was no water. But Rashi says, even though there was no water, but there were snakes and scorpions in the pit. So the female educator told Rabbi Braun that if a girl's mind is empty of the water of Torah, then her mind will become full of snakes and scorpions. I'll give you some examples of snakes and scorpions, like being obsessed with fashion and celebrities. And Rabbi Braun agreed to this woman's vart about V'haborek Ein B'mayim, that if a girl or woman's mind is not filled with Torah, it will be filled with snakes and scorpions.
Everything that's true of men as well.
Right, but she was really making a push that that fathers should spend time learning with their daughters, learning Torah. And there's a Gemara in Brachos, Daf Yud Zayin. The Gemara is declaring Amar Rav L'Rabbi Rav asked Rabbi Chia, Nashim b'mai zachin. In what schus do women go to Olam Haba? And the Gemara answers, Ba'akri b'nai le'miknishta, when women bring their children to shul to learn, V'asnu gevai b'rabanan, and when women send their husband to the study hall to learn Torah, Unotrin l'gevaihu ad asim b'rabanan, and the women wait up for their husbands until they come home from the study hall. So in these 3 capacities, women have a share in Olam Haba. And Rabbi Nissen Miller, Marav, he told me that the last part is that women demonstrate to their husbands that their husbands are important when the husbands come back home from learning and the wife waits up for them. So that shows the husband that he's important and that his learning is important. In that way, women have a share in Olam Haba. And I want to say a word from recent Parshas as something to be mechazik, to give strength to people who feel that they may not necessarily be involved in Klei Kodesh or learning or externally holy pursuits as much as they would like or as much as they think is appropriate. hopefully as much as they would like. So in the end of Parshas Bamidbar, we learned about Mishpachas Kas, the family of Kas, son of Levi. And Kas' job was to transport the Aron, the menorah, the Shulchan, and the Mizbeach, the holy parts of the Mishkan. And then, in the beginning of Parshas Naso, the Torah talks about Gershon's responsibilities. Gershon was one of Kas' brothers, son of Levi. And Gershon's job was lavod l'masa, to carry the various panels, curtains, and weavings of the Mishkan, which were not as holy as the Aron and the other artifacts that the Mishpachas Kas, their brother, was carrying. So when the Torah is introducing the statement to Mishpachas Gershon, the Pasuk says, Naso es rosh b'nei Gershon gam heim. Lift up the head of Gershon, also them. So there's a verse from one of the Sfarim, Elimelech likes to quote from Darash Moshe, or Moshe Feinstein, who says, what's the meaning of gam heim? So Darash Moshe says it means that, gam heim meaning also then, that just as Kahas, who's carrying the Aron and the other artifacts, is chashuv, is of esteem and worth and importance, so too Gershon, even though what they're carrying is not as holy, but if they're maximizing their potential as an Eved Hashem and serving Hashem in the best way, then Mishpachas Gershon is equally chashuv and of equal esteem as their brother Kahas, whose job is to carry the Aron and the other holy artifacts. So hopefully we see from here that this importance and the influence of every person, like they used to say in the Patriots locker room, do your job. That if a person does his job according to the best way, according to the Ratzon Hashem, then he's just as chashuv as anyone who may be learning full time or be a rebbe or a shiva. A person who's doing what he's supposed to be doing is just as worthwhile, according to Moshe Feinstein, as someone who's more involved in overt holiness more of the time. I'd like to tell one more story in the second to last section. So this last story is a true story from actually just last week, because when I was coming home from Boston Kollel, I rode the train from the Green Line B to Back Bay in Boston. But on the way to Back Bay, we stopped at Kenmore. Now, Kenmore is famous in Boston for being the stop that you get on after you go to the Red Sox game. It's a baseball game. So it happens to be, when I came back, it was a Tuesday night, Motzei Shavuos, about 10:15 p.m., and I was totally blindsided because scores and scores of Red Sox fans began boarding the train. The train was like pretty empty most of the ride, but once we got to Kenmore, the train was packed and everyone was standing. I had a seat, but the other people were standing. And I thought about what I was learning about over Shavuos, Rav Yosef, Kama Yosef Ika B'Shuka, how many Joes are there in the marketplace. And I thought about myself, how I used to literally be boarding that same train from Kenmore to get to Back Bay after the Red Sox game. And I realized that having come from such a dehyped and such an elevated Shavuos, and I literally came firsthand, like what Shlomi Lindenbaum was saying, a first-hand example of Kama Yosef Ika B'Shuka, the Joes in the marketplace waiting for the train from Kenmore. And I came up with the following song while I was watching them board the train. This is the tune of Kihim Chayenu, a slow song we sing on Shavuos, to the high part Ba'avaska. So this is how it went. Again, the words are Kama Yosef Ika B'Shuka. Kama Yosef, how many Yosef Joes Ika are there B'Shuka in the marketplace? Kama Yosef, Kama Yosef, Kama Yosef, Kama Yosef. Ika b'shuka, oh Kama Yosef, Ika b'shuka. Kama Yosef, Kama Yosef, Kama Yosef, Kama Yosef, Ika b'shuka, oh Kama Yosef, Ika b'shuka.
Well said. Well said.
How many Joes are there in the marketplace? As scores and scores of Red Sox fans boarded the train. And I thought, I used to be one of them. I used to be boarding that train. Baruch Hashem, I was zochet to be able to sit in front of the Torah, and hopefully everyone is in a different place than they were when they were young, but Baruch Hashem, I'm in a different place. And I literally could still be boarding the train from Kenmore from the Red Sox game, because the Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva, Parak Hey Halacha Beis, that any person could be a tzaddik like Moshe Rabbeinu, or he has a choice to be a rasha like Yeravim ben Nevat, one of the wicked kings of Israel. So Rav Hirsch has a vart on the pasuk we say in Shabbos morning, and we say in Simchas Torah, Hanachamadim mizav mipaz rav, Tilim Yotes. That Torah is choicer than gold and fine diamonds. Rav Hirsch says this means that living a Torah lifestyle is more desirable than having a lot of physical pursuits. Like, for example, a person who has a Torah lifestyle has menuchas nefesh. He's centered and balanced. He's not driven by kinotype and kavod, by hatred, jealousy and honor, by lust. It's not driven by the negative emotions. It's a more pleasant way to live. And the Malbim says in the pasuk of Re'eh Anochi Nosim Lefnechem Hayom Brachol Klala, the beginning of Parshat Ve'eh, he says that a person can just open his eyes and see how someone who's living a Torah lifestyle is a more beautiful way to live. Rabbi Beer said an alternative read in the Gemara of Kama Yosef B'Shuka. Right, until now we've been learning that there's Rav Yosef who learned Torah, and the other Joes, whether they're non-Jewish or Jewish who didn't maximize their potential or didn't learn for whatever reason. So Rav Yosef, have the Torah, and Kama Yosef B'Shuka doesn't really have. But Rabbi Beer has a different take when he says, Yom HaKagarim, the day of Shavuos caused Kama Yosef B'Shuka, that all of us named Yosef, we all have the Torah, maybe in a different capacity. Rav Yosef may be learning, other people may be a cobbler, maybe a woodchopper, but we all have the Torah. And therefore, like the first in the Gemara, it's important for every Jew to celebrate on Shavuos, because we all have the Torah. One of the families I was by in Boston, the Fontek family, so Rabbi Hanan Fontek, Rebbe Masifta of Boston, he said two shatim on the words V'sein Chalkini B'Sorah Secha, which we say on Shavuos, and we also say on every Shabbos and Yom Tov. The first understanding is that V'sein Chalkini B'Sorah Secha, we're asking Hashem to place our portion in the Torah. However our portion is, however it's going to be, we ask Hashem that it's placed in the Torah. And the Al-Shech's pshat is that at Har Sinai, our neshamas received a certain portion in Torah, and we're davening to Hashem that Hashem should let us receive the portion in Torah that was set for our neshamas at Har Sinai. The Al-Shech saying we're davening to Hashem that Hashem should let us receive and internalize and realize the portion in Torah that our neshamas got at Har Sinai. Because again, there's two dinim of the Gemara. The first rule of the Gemara is for every person, every Jewish person on Shavuos, to put out nice food in order to demonstrate that Shavuos is a pleasing day to them, that we're glad we got the Torah. even if a person is not a big Baal Torah, he's not a big learner, but if he generally keeps the mitzvahs, it's certainly appropriate to put out a nice meal on Shavuos. Then the second thing Rav Yosef personally added on to that, because he was so grateful to have been able to learn Torah and been taken to a different place. That's why he, Rav Yosef, decided to bring out the Igla Tilsa, to have a third-born calf, to have an extra special meal on Shavuos. And Robert Fontek, when he sang the song, he was singing the song, Kadshenu b'mitzosecha v'sikolkeinu b'saratzecha. And then for the high part, usually we sing the words of the Tahir Levin la'avdacha b'emes, and purify our hearts to serve you with authenticity. But Rabbi Fontek sang different words to the words of V'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha, and give us your portion in the Torah. V'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha. V'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha. Hara v'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha. V'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha. V'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha. V'sein chalkeinu b'saratzecha. And you should give you should place our portion in the Torah. Whether it's placing our lot in the Torah or giving us whatever role, whatever amount of Torah we're supposed to have, let us receive it. That either means to place our portion in the Torah, or to give us the portion that our neshamas received, to give us that portion. Okay, well, I'd like to give everyone a bracha. We should be zocher to reach the madrega of Lamanti Torah Mamti, whether we're learning Torah ourselves, whether we're learning Torah, living Torah, whether we're sending our children to learn and sending our husbands to learn and waiting for our husbands to come home at night, whether we're learning halacha, to be able to be knowledgeable and able to ask shilas when they come up, when we're learning hashkafa, and mostly to give us a proper Torah outlook, and we zocher to see the sweetness of the malbim of Re'eh Anochi, to see the beauty and realize and internalize for us, our families, our communities, and Klal Yisrael, the beauty of living a Torah life. We should all have a good summer.
Amen.